Let's take our 3D Studio Max model and convert it to GLB, as you can see here in Babylon. There are two scripts you're going to need, one for 3D Studio Max and one for Blender. They'll be available in the YouTube description. The one we need for 3D Studio Max is the Vray to Blender GLB. So let's click on that and then select download. For Blender, we're going to need two. One is the Waterbottle GLB and the other is the convert to GLB Python script. So download all three of those. So in 3D, you'll notice that our scene is set up with Vray. So when we look at the materials, you'll notice, first of all, we have two in a multi-sub, and they're using the roughness workflow. So our fabric, if we have a look, needs a minimum of a base color, a normal, and a roughness. And for our legs, you'll notice we also have a metal texture. This also applies to our other materials. So if we have a look at the table, for example, our first input will be the marble material, and the second input will be the legs, which also has a metal input. So let's remove this for now. We don't need it. So let's open the asset tracker. And what the script is going to do to begin with is swap out your DirectX normal textures for OpenGL. Since 3D Studio Max uses DirectX, Blender uses OpenGL. If your textures are just labeled normal, then you don't have to worry about it. Or if they're already set up for the OpenGL format, then you're good to go. You'll also notice we don't have any occlusion textures in here. This will be handled later. So let's go ahead and install the script. We're going to drag the MS file into the viewport, then right-click on our toolbar, Customize, and in your categories, go down to Vela. Select the Automate Vray to Blender GLB script and drag it to the toolbar. Also note that our models currently have an open subdiv modifier, and for GLB, we want to optimize this so the script will remove them. So let's go ahead and run the script. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things the script does is swap the OpenGL textures. So as you can see, any normal DirectX is now swapped for OpenGL. The second thing it's going to do is condense your multi-subs into one by selecting the one with the largest amount of textures to keep this as optimized as possible. The next thing it's going to do is take all your textures, put them in the correct map slots, and set up your standard material settings for export to FBX. If you have a keen eye, you'll notice that the occlusion texture wasn't here before. It searches the directory where the other textures are, and if it finds one with underscore occlusion or AO, it's going to put this in the specular slot. Now, it's not correct, but it's enough for us to get it into the FBX file, and we can handle this inside Blender. So let's go ahead and export. So let's head to the directory where we want to put it. I'm going to my demo folder and give it a name. Then it's going to pop up with the FBX settings. You can set these to default. Just enable the embed textures so that it takes our textures with us when we export the FBX file. So we're done in 3D Studio Max. Let's head over to Blender. Now in our Blender scene, this is our basic default scene. We don't need any of this stuff here, so remove that and open up our shader editor to the right. Let's go ahead and import our FBX file. Once we've imported our object, let's zoom in a little bit and turn shaded on so we can see our materials. Select the sofa and have a look at our shader setup. As you notice, we have all the textures that we need. base color, AO, metal, roughness, and our normal at the bottom here. So we're good to go. Also, we have them all linear except our diffuse, which is sRGB. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is go to our downloads folder where we have the script and the water bottle for Blender. Put the water bottle somewhere on your drive and open up the Python script. We want to just change this line here to the location of your water bottle. So make sure you put it in a permanent location so you don't have to edit this in the future. Okay, now we're going to copy the script to our startup folder for Blender and go to your Blender folder, find the version number, open the scripts directory, and then copy the script to the startup folder. If you're coming from the future, do this first so you don't have to reload Blender. Then press N, go to your tool menu, select the Convert to GLB button, and this is where the magic happens. Now let's click on our sofa, and you'll notice that the occlusion is now wired to a GLTF settings group. This came from the water bottle, so this sets up our occlusion in the GLB. Also, the other textures are correctly linked where they should be. So we are ready to move on to the next thing. You'll also notice that we have a new node, the UVW node, which I'll show why we need this shortly. Also, pay attention to any nodes that use an opacity map like glass or leaves. Glass by default will come in with alpha blend, so that takes care of those types of materials automatically, so you don't have to worry about that. Things like leaves that have stacked UVs on channel 1, this is where if you've unwrapped your UV channel 2, so it's not overlapping, this is where we can now input UV channel 2 into our occlusion and change that to channel 2. So our occlusion is not overlapping, as you can see here. So now that we're happy with our scene and our materials, we are ready to export to GLB. So go to File, Export, GLB. Go to our demo folder, and we can also include selected objects, but in this case, we're just going to export the whole thing. So let's give it a name, and off we go. Let's test it in Babylon. So let's go to our directory, select our GLB, and drag it in. Now you notice one issue, and that is our vase here. So what's going on? Let's figure that out, hey? Go back to Blender. Now let's have a look at the material settings for the vase, and let's select alpha clip. So the reason we want this is so that it clips around the alpha of the leaves. The rest of our opacity texture shows as white, so this should work correctly. So let's override our previous file, bring it in, and have another look. And we resolved that issue. So just remember we have that set up because of our glass by default, which means just anything with leaves, just double check that. Now, as good practice, the last thing to do is just double check it in Windows 3D Viewer or whatever you prefer, and check the albedo texture, make sure our normals are working, our metals are in the right place, and same with our roughness, occlusion, and opacity. All looks good. We're ready to deliver.